Hi, my name is Roger Robinson, and I'm here with Magma. And today we're talking about dwelling. I want to start with an idea of dwelling that I was just telling someone just previous to this. I've been spending a lot of time in my backyard, and I have a backyard, and I have the privilege of having a backyard, but I've never spent a lot of time with it, like real quiet time. And I've been trying to not read or not do anything in that time in the backyard. I'm trying to experience the backyard as opposed to be in the backyard to just get the sun. And there's a few things I noticed. One, we have a massive wood pigeon that's up in a tree, and wood pigeon um, is in a tree full of thorns, and the wood pigeon's so big. I wondered about why did it choose a tree full of thorns? The other thing I realized during the entire summer is that that tree full of thorns is full with at least 500 wasps. So I know this is an unconventional beginning, but the wood pigeon is in the center of thorns and 500 wasps. Yeah. I'm sitting down there and I'm hearing the humming of the wasps like an engine ready to roar. And I'm sitting down there and I'm like, I hope I don't get stung. But I sat down there and I thought, well, actually, this is the outside environment. And the pigeon is not getting stung. And we sat there most days in the summer when it was hot. And the wasp never did us anything at all. The pigeon never did us anything at all. In fact, we get up and we see the pigeon literally strolling around the yard like he was doing an inspection before we came out. And when we came out, he would leave. I was like, okay, what about my thoughts made me think that this is my yard and I don't want any wasps in it? And this is my yard and I don't want a pigeon strolling around. Or this is my tree and I don't want the pigeon to have his eggs in the tree. And so I made a conscious effort. So my other thought, if I was rushing around, would be, I need to call a specialist to get these wasps before they sting everybody. Nobody was stung. I had visitors. There was nobody. Wasps never did anybody anything to anybody. And then I realized, like, oh, this is a basic metaphor for power relations. This belongs to me, and I have to destroy it. There's no other reason for it. Of course, there's the possible danger of the gentle wasp stinging me, but that's just my idea of what a wasp would do. Then there's the possible idea that the pigeon might defecate everywhere, but he didn't do that. So all possibles, and these possibles made me decide, would make me decide in a different time when I was probably less peaceful that I want to exert my power, and this is my yard. But then me exerting my power, I know this is long, sorry. Me exerting my power might make wasps sting me. You know what I'm saying? And make wasps react to my power, what you call it. Me trying to get the pigeon to leave with his eggs and stuff and not feel peaceful when it might cause him to defecate more. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, and so the exertion of your power can create a certain type of pushback problem. And so that, when you're talking about dwelling, that's the idea that came to mind. You know, like if you don't start to get caught up in your stereotypes, then you don't have the conflicts. You don't have the exertion of power. You know, yeah. And it's a backyard lesson, but it's a good lesson for me.
Okay,
Also,
now that actually it kind of leads sort of onto the first question that I was going to ask. Well, it's actually the second question I was going to ask, but I think I'll maybe just go for that one, and it's to do with home. It's to
yes,
do with what is yours, and it's
yeah,
I was reading your poem, the ever changing dot, which I think is a really interesting poem, and you say things about home like where is home when thinking takes the form of moving on, and is home in the shifting memories of the mind, and perhaps it is in the words of wanderers we feel truly at home. What does home mean to you?
um, so like home for me is wherever you can turn on the volume from outside. You can turn on the volume, and the home for me is where my family is. My home is not this house. My home is not bricks and mortar. My home is with people. The value for me in my home is with my family. So I can have any bricks and mortar, but I can't have any family. You know, there's a big conversation about the theaters that's going on that I find quite interesting, because the theaters are no longer following; they're just literally letting go of all their workers. But then, what is the theater? Is the theater the real estate? Is your home real estate? Really? Is it bricks and mortar? That's your is it theater bricks and mortar, or is it the people who reside in the theater, the people who work every day to kind of create these moments of suspension of disbelief, who work together with the lights and create all these narratives? What actually is the theater? You know, and that question kind of brought me up to start thinking about, okay, what exactly is home? I feel home is more nearly psychogeographic now, you know, because we're all online, and the people who I connect with, the people who I think with, who I gravitate to, a lot of them don't even live in this country anymore. And so I feel like I have a psychogeographic home with lots of different writers who and friends who live in different countries, but we have similar ideals, similar thoughts. We enjoy time together. And so home for me is really, you know, being able to to choose to spend time with people who you you could turn on the volume of the world together. You know what I'm saying? Like, and interested in changing the way will in specific ways that are the embodiment of your complexity. You know?
Okay. And I suppose that also kind of leads on to your conception of paradise,
Right.
which many people would see as a, you know, as something, an afterlife, a heaven,
Yeah, yeah,
something like that. But for you, it seems to be something, well, something you carry with you, but you
yeah,
say it's concealed so no one can steal it from you, something
yeah,
that's part of you. And
yeah.
I just wondered, you know, is it something you carry as a hope for a future, or is it something that feels real within the present day, that
Yeah.
actually is something that gives you hope? Where is that found? And
Well, in the
how
book,
do you,
I kind of go through lots of kind of not dots, but some different kind of uh, philosophical perspectives of or excavations of what it can be. But for me personally, it's definitely, you know, paradise is something that you carry inside of you. You know, because I would hate it to be that, like in the idea of heaven, which I do believe in, yeah, the idea of heaven that you are working all this time to get to this paradise. You know what I'm saying? It's like things are sold to you in different ways. Because my perspective of heaven is not paradise. Paradise and heaven are two different things. But I know it's a very common idea that paradise and heaven are aligned. Um, Whereas for me, paradise is to some extent, at its basics, a level of hope. It's something that they can't take away from you. You could always hope for something better. It's not something that can be easily eradicated. Even people in their worst, they still have hope that things will change. And that hope is important to the human spirit. So that's what I see it as, you know, it's, and, you know, we talk about dwelling. It's something that really dwells inside of you. That with all things abandoned, something can change for the better, for even though you can't fathom the reason. You know what I'm saying? It's like
yeah,
look at
yeah,
me, 26 years, I've had nothing. And then I went to T.S. Eliot, you know, without the whole idea of paradise or hope inside of it. I mean, I wasn't hoping for the T.S. Eliot, but I was hoping to be able to have the resources to continue my practice. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Yeah.
I think that leading on from that, um, prayer and faith are important elements of your work, Roger.
Yeah.
And I think often in relation to violence and inherited trauma, but
Yeah.
also as a foundation of hope and community solidarity as well. So is that faith something you grew up with or something you came to later in life? You know, is it central to your thinking, or is it more of a sort of atmosphere that you've absorbed from family or from Trinidad culture maybe?
Yeah, I mean, my mother is wildly religious, but the effect it had on me was to push me away from religion, because it just was a lot, you know. It's in it like and but it's what she needed, but it's not what I could perceive growing up as a child. But what I did learn is a lot of good religious principles from her, even though for me it felt like the fervor of it felt like desperation. And the desperation is what kind of pushed me away from it. And I examined lots of other things in terms of faiths and stuff like that. Muslim religion, Rastafarian kind of philosophy, Buddhist type of philosophy, and you know, and some of them were lifestyles, and some things I will take something from Buddhism or Rastafarianism that I think that works for me, but that is not my faith. You know what I'm saying? It's just like the philosophy and the lifestyle of it can work because it's just a good thing, you know, that you can do. But that's not my faith. My faith is Christianity. But my Christianity is not a Christianity of hate, not a Christianity of homophobia, not a Christianity of racism. And Christianity has all these things linked to it. That makes it really hard for people to, you know, take Christianity seriously because of all the failures. But, you know, for me, all these failures are failures of men. Yeah. And not failures of a God. And so I have an idea of a God, and these things are failures of men and not failures of God. And so my Christianity is, for want of a better word, is a progressive Christianity, in that there are works to do in the world to make the world better. What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And how are you going about it? You know, and what is your specific contribution to the world? But I don't want to preach to anyone, because, you know, I respect that other people have other religions, which is a different thing about my Christianity too. I respect that someone who's Muslim prays to Allah, and I will respect that he believes in something, because it's the belief that's important to me. You know, that you believe in your religion, that's fine. I have no reason to judge you in what your religion is or everything like that. So it's unconventional, and some would even say probably pick and mix, but it's mine.
Yeah. And you mentioned your mother there, and I have to say, I really loved a lot of the poems about women in the collection.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, like you have like poems that mention grandmothers, you know,
Yes.
and I think the gifts that they pass on.
Yeah.
And there was a great poem about Sade, and this
Yeah.
sort of, you know, confrontational kind of poem, which was her sort of speaking back to critics, which I liked as well.
Yeah.
And then there's the nurse Grace, who I think, you know, that poem is just so beautiful, you know, that kind of that care and tenderness, and, you know, the worry about, you know, the precarious life of children, you know. I think that was really beautiful. And then also Saints, which was a poem which seemed to me to be breaking down the virgin whore dichotomy and doing something interesting with that. So I wondered if you could talk a bit to those poems.
Well, so my mom is one of 13 children, and so there are 9 sisters. So my whole life was dominated by those sisters, and they're very forceful, and, you know, and to some extent, no husbands or anything could even kind of come between them. They're strong. One was very strong. So I grew up with a lot of women all the time, and I have a sister. I don't even think about, like, in my mind, I don't think about trying to write about women well, even though that's what's been coming up. I just think I've been exposed to women with nuance, and so I don't just fall into stereotypes of women. You know what I'm saying? And I can recognize, because my mother had so many sisters, I can recognize the nuance in women. And sometimes when I write it down, I'm literally writing what I'm seeing. Grace actually happened. All the words were there. The only thing I can say with that poem is how I sequenced it. And if anything, there's anything rightly about it, is what followed what, in terms of its stanzas and in terms of the bits of dialogue and stuff. But everything in the poem happened. There was no embellishment. That her name was actually Grace. You know what I'm saying? So she was like a walking poem. You know. So I don't really think about how to write women, but I'm glad that I'm not falling into stereotypical traps of writing about women.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these poems, like Grace and other poems at that point in the book, are very moving, actually. And I wondered about your thoughts on the relationship between poetry and restoration and healing and so on. If there is well, that seemed to be some of what the themes of these poems were.
For sure. I would say, you know, there's one thing about the book, is the last section of the book, which kind of around the idea of, you know, my child's birth. That section was not going to be in the book. That was because I had the poems, but I wasn't going to be that section. That section was not going to be, because I had started in my practice to start moving away from the I or anything autobiographical, you know what I'm saying? And nearly going towards kind of reporting documentary type things, you know, and I still wanted to get the empathy, I still wanted to get the feeling in it, but I was moving away from the I. But the reason I put it back in is that there was a thin line through the book about the devaluation of the Black body. And I thought, well, even though it's my son, somebody valued his Black body. So I thought it was a public resonance, even though the private still had public resonance. And as it happened through COVID, that public resonance kept on coming up again and again and again in terms of nurses working and bodies and, you know, who survives, who lives, who's affected by COVID and stuff like that. So I'm glad I did put it in. I did read one review was saying, apart from the last section, this book is pretty good. I just like, okay, that's good. No, that's cool. I think it's because it's a thought that I had. So, you know, it's a close reader. I don't mind close readers saying something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I thought that perhaps I shouldn't have the kind of, and also too, in English poetry, the I has never been in vogue. And things with emotion have often been judged as sentimental. And the sentimental has never been in vogue in English poetry. And to some extent, in my career, being in that context, because I think I've always had a spiritual quotient or a spiritual component of the work. There was a long time when I was working where that was not considered valuable. You know, the whole idea of the poet of the I and holding back emotion like a dam has been in vogue in English poetry. And I do appreciate poetry like that, but it just never comes out like that with me. So, and I think there's been a shift where, especially with millennials, it's just like the whole idea of toxic masculinity and being able to express things more have made a little shift. And then all of a sudden, you know, a lot of the things I may be writing have become irrelevant within that context, you know. So.
And I loved the poem Repast, which was about this kind of urge to eat.
Yes.
The child surviving, the child's doing well, but in the poem that the child is you know in a precarious place, and this desire to eat, you know. And I thought somehow that seemed to me to connect to this idea of paradise, of trying to make something or to experience something sensual, which was a kind of contrast to all this other stuff, which was painful and difficult as well.
It was definitely about trying to reset to deal with trauma. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I guess that was very kind of revelatory, but also in a way I was trying to get the sensual nature of actually eating the thing. You know what I'm saying? What was it like to actually eat the thing, and you know, and the greed of it, trying to get in the pace. What the idea of trying to consume things at. So I wanted it to move briskly in terms of its form, and briskly and nearly list the amount of things that you're trying to just cram into your mouth to kind of deal with trauma, what you turn to. A friend of mine was telling me that you can literally get addicted to anything. It all depends on what you choose to do it. So people often talk about alcohol or drugs, but people get addicted to all types of things. You know what I'm saying? It's just like it's whatever gives them the reset of what you have access to, and the specific nature of your, you know, families, what you've been trained to use as comfort. And in the West Indies, we've been trained with food for comfort. It's like every single thing. It's just like, yo, I didn't get the job. Oh, let's eat some food. I got the job. Oh man, let's eat. You know what I'm saying? It's just like everything. It's just like Christmas, let's eat. Easter, let's eat. Come across to my house, we'll eat. You know. So, but it's good in our culture. But it's as a cultural. Food is a cultural object in the West Indies, and lots of other cultures too, in Italy. And, you know, like I remember going to Naples, and I was just like, I wasn't aware of courses of food because I was just young, you know, and I was at a festival, and I was like, oh, okay, so these guys just eating cheese for dinner. All right, it's all good. And then I was just like, and then there was more food and more food. I was like, oh my God, how much food do you all eat? And how does it come out, you know? So.
I lived in Italy for about 5 years, and I remember going to a wedding where there were 11 courses.
Yes, exactly. And not only that, in the festival, we went to the festival after that. I was so sleepy because I was full, because it was like, endless amounts of courses. And I read. And then as soon as I read, I was just so ridiculously full still. And then they said, "Oh, we're going for dinner in a minute, so just stay around here." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Saying for dinner we just ate. What are you talking about? But it was a place to gather and discuss things and kind of make things collective. And they had it was in Naples, and I had not realized that in Italy at the time they had a kind of slightly communist history, so they invited a lot of poets from communist countries, and then they was like singing the all communist songs. I was just like, oh my god, this is like on some whole other level. So, but me, I think I was like 23 at the time, but for me, I was just like, whoa, this is nuts.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd like to ask about Brixton, Roger, because you write quite a lot of poems about Brixton, and they're all very different. They all give very different atmospheres and moods and so on, which is quite interesting in itself. And I've got two things about Brixton really. But one is what I know you lived there for a certain time, but what motivates you to write about it? What are you trying to convey about Brixton, or is it?
What Brixton is? Brixton is a constant battle of for want of a better word, developers versus people who have been there. Now, the people who live in Brixton, because it's been a site of so much culture and so much immigration from a long time ago, Brixton nearly creates its own characters that are actually different from West Indians. It's like the nature of the place is that it creates its own characters. So the people who lived there for a very long time are very strong-willed and anti-authoritarian. But it's prime land, and economics creates that clash all the time. And so what you have is silos developing in Brixton where they're not speaking to each other, but then they start spilling out and clashing. And where those clashes happens, I like the good and bad of those splashes where they interconnect with each other. And also moves in waves sometimes. So I mean, they've been trying to gentrify, and I would say it's pretty much gentrified now. Brixton, you could probably get, if you want octopus for supper, Brixton is the place to go. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but it never used to be like that. So, but for a long time, they tried to gentrify and re-crackify Brixton. And I quite was interested in how a drug problem could stop gentrification in its tracks, no matter what it could do. And I think the gentrifiers have won now. And I say the gentrifiers, and I don't think everything a gentrifier is a negative term. I'm not anti-development in Brixton. I don't live in Brixton anymore, so it's none of my business. So I'm not anti-development in Brixton. I like flat white with hotels.